good afternoon to everyone. Indeed, a pleasure. Once again, thank you to Sid, Justin, Paul, and everyone else for kind of joining and for inviting me. What I'm going to do in the next 25, 30 minutes is, firstly, by the way, I mean, my preferred style, I wish this was in person, but since we can't meet in person, feel free to interject via the chat process. I would always be happy to kind of share my perspective, answer questions. I'm just going to be talking about digital transformation and the importance of mindset and how that kind of drives change and culture. And I think the five key components, when it comes to this whole transformation process, is very much hovered around people, process, technology, data, partnerships. So I'm just going to give you my perspective and what I'm seeing in Asia. I'm based out of Singapore, as you might be able to tell from my background, which is not a real background, of course, but a quick sense on my journey so far, just to so that it kind of lends some context. I grew up in India. Then I did my high schooling in Indonesia. So I've lived in two very large emerging markets, very dynamic, very exciting, lovely places for travel. Of course, they have their own set of challenges when it comes to infrastructure, governmental policy, so on and so forth, but very exciting economies nonetheless. But for the last 20 years, I've been in Singapore. So I came to study here in the National University, did a degree in computer engineering, and then joined the Singapore Civil Service, which is nothing short of a private sector enterprise on its own. And after that, I did work for a couple of private sector entities in the brand management and the digital marketing space before starting on my own. Singapore, as some of you may have experienced, is probably one of the best entrepreneurial hubs in APAC, if not in the whole world. It's fantastic in terms of great ease of doing of business, great connectivity between India, China, and Southeast Asia. And it's been a great experience. And about a year and a half ago, we sold the business to a large Japanese conglomerate called Dentsu. So I'm still very much part of the business. So from a tiny startup that we scaled up to about 60 people, now we are part of a larger group, in Dentsu, and I drive one of the business units within Dentsu. I've had the good opportunity to work with startups as well as large enterprises, as well as be on boards of certain young startup enterprises. I also do invest in startups as an angel investor or spend some time as an advisor. And if not working, as Sid would tell you, I do enjoy my cricket, right? So that's a bit about myself, and that's a bit about my professional journey. So the gentleman on the, so it's me on the left, funnily with the same jacket, 2 years prior, and that's Rachit on the right corner. He's my business partner, and the three gentlemen in the middle are people from Dentsu and a brand called Merkle, an American brand that we sold into, which is, so Merkle's part of Dentsu as well. So it's been a very exciting journey. And so whatever I share is essentially from my experience in Singapore for the last 20 odd years. So I think, when it comes to digital transformation, the first and foremost, the most important thing for me is defining what it means for you. And, it's a term that has been used heavily across the world, across small to large companies, to government bodies. But I think it has to be contextualized, because it means different things for different people. And one of the ways I try and kind of do this for my clients is this is one way of doing it, right? So some of these logos may be familiar if you're familiar with Asia. If you're not, essentially what you see on the left are venture-backed, fast-growing unicorns, right? Companies that, well, unicorn by definition is a mythological creature. And on the right-hand side, what you notice are traditional businesses. These are automotive companies, banks, could be family-owned businesses like Lippo or the Central Group, could be automotive companies, right? But traditional businesses, brick and mortar businesses that have been around for 50, 60, if not 100 odd years, right? And their focus is primarily on revenue and profits. On the left-hand side, it's a very different business model where they could be profitless for a decade because they're funded by the soft banks of the world or large other VCs, right? And I think it matters. Many times we have clients from the right-hand side who want to emulate what the guys on the left are doing. Now, whilst there are lessons to be learned, you really are on two different trajectories. Now, very few public listed companies or family-owned businesses have the luxury to kind of go on that 7 to 10 year profitless journey. So if you can't play that game, you can't be following, you're not following the rules of that particular set of companies. So I think it's very important to kind of admit to oneself who we are and who we are not, and which game do we want to play, and accordingly calibrate what digital transformation means for us, right? So I think it's important to get that reality check and accordingly set ambitions. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the folks on the right are old school and they can't grow fast. They definitely can. In fact, some of these companies out here, DBS, for example, in a matter of a decade now, they've become the world's best digital bank. It's a traditional bank that started out of Singapore, but today, when it comes to digital bank, they have been voted in the top 3 for the last 4 to 5 years. So you definitely can make a dent, and probably a realistic dent which is measured by profits. But to drive this, I think many a times the conversation hovers very much around data and technology. But I think, as today's topic suggests, and as what I've experienced, what really drives that change in the real world is people, mindsets, and organizational structure, right? What do I mean? Here's a quick question for all of you, right? Just to kind of put that into context. I'll take a pause for 10 seconds. Just think about what's common about the chief marketing officers in these major global brands. Feel free to kind of type it out if you can in the chat window. If you know, what are some commonalities? And again, I'm using marketing as an example, but a lot of these, could be relevant for chief technology officers. Again, we're talking about people here, right? So I'll wait for 10 seconds in case there's any perspective on, yeah, they come from major brands. Absolutely. So I've chosen some common Fortune 500 brands so that all of us from different parts of the world could relate to it. But you'll be surprised that this trend that I'm about to talk about is true in various industries, whether B2C or B2B. All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to proceed. So what's common about these guys? Obviously, most of these come from the US, from the Western world. But a recent commonality is many of these brands are shedding off the chief marketing officer function. Many of them do not have a CMO. And that sends a huge signal, the message to the rest of the world, because if you come from a B school or an MBA school, you learn about marketing at these organizations, you kind of emulate, you want to emulate them, you look up to them, right? So what's happening? Why are these brands, shedding off the CMO role? Do they not think that marketing is important? Not true. So if you want to deep dive into this subject, you may want to look into this cover story article in the Harvard Business Review of 2017. And there's a wonderful thesis around why CMOs never last. So what's happening here is it's not that marketing is not important, it's that the definition of marketing is changing. In summary, what they've really found out is in the boardroom, the CMO has the shortest shelf life and the least budget. And we have, as an agency, I've definitely learned that I have, when I go and pitch to clients, I could be working with the marketing function or the tech function or the IT function. And what I've seen as a service side provider is I'm better off working with the CTO or the CIO as opposed to the CMO. Why is that? For two fundamental reasons. Typically, CMOs have a generally, and again, the caveat is generally, they tend to have a short-term focus. And a typical symptom is if you start hearing the word campaign. Campaign by definition is Christmas campaign, New Year campaign, back to school campaign. So you take a very short, myopic 3 to 6 month view. But if you speak to a CTO or a CIO, they're looking at a longer term impact. They're talking CapEx. They're talking larger transformation. That's one. The other is, what are they accountable for? So if you look at the pie chart, most CMOs still are very, very communications focused, very much focused on social media, very much focused on the aesthetics. Nothing wrong with it. But unless and until they change focused on growth, on P&L, on enterprise-wide strategy, things are going to be difficult. And a classic symptom is, again, when things go bad during an economic crisis like the one that we are going through, typically budgets that get cut off, apart from travel entertainment, is marketing and advertising, which to me is not fair, but I can understand why the CEO or the CFO would do that, because they tend to perceive marketing to be an aesthetic function. But that's changing with these large brands, with digital native brands like Uber, Grab, etc. They are essentially not cutting off the marketing function, but they're actually expanding the remit. They're saying right from brand awareness to marketing comms and social media to customer loyalty to brand advocacy to customer service, all of that entire customer journey must be driven by this one person and his or her team. Now, you may change the name to a chief growth officer or a chief digital officer, doesn't matter what you call them. But the point is the remit or the expectation from the marketing function is changing. And that's first, right? So my point I'm trying to make here is that different functions within an organization must change their outlook, the way they are structured. And when we speak of digital transformation, the CMO function has a huge accountability and a huge role to play in this journey. And a lot starts with the org structure, the mindset, your remit, right? Next is, what is this data-driven mindset? So one of the things that I'm noticing in this part of the world is most businesses, again, whether you're on the left-hand side or right-hand side, typically are transactional businesses. But now there is a huge focus to become a recurring revenue business, a subscription business. I've borrowed this term called rundles. I don't know if you guys follow this professor, Scott Galloway, one of my favorite professors from NYU. He's extremely vocal and opinionated about what's happening in the world right now. But one of the things that he's been speaking about for the last few months is the importance of moving to the subscription economy, importance of moving from a pure transaction business to a recurring revenue subscription model. And you can read this particular blog, but for example, here he speaks about the difference between a Walmart, Apple, and Amazon. The Apples and Amazons are definitely moving into the subscription recurring business. In fact, if you look at Apple, it took 42 years to get to $1 trillion market cap, but probably less than a couple of years to get closer to the 2 trillion mark. And a lot of that is driven not by the iPods or the AirPods or the iPhones, but it's the 300 million plus subscription audience, right? So subscription recurring revenue, I think, is something that a lot of businesses, new age businesses, are looking after. So if you look at Apple's P&L, that's the story I was talking about, right? If you look at the right-hand side chart, it's businesses like Netflix, Peloton, Amazon, Adobe. Adobe is a classic case of all of us probably grew up with Adobe Photoshop in CD-ROMs, but those don't exist anymore. They've all moved to the cloud. Likewise, Salesforce. So any business that can move to a cloud or a SaaS-like model, and mind you, it doesn't have to be a software business. It could be a retail business. Peloton is a fitness or a wellness business, but there's always a possibility to transform a traditional business into a cloud-driven SaaS-based business model. So it's really about the business model. It's not really about the product per se, right? And there's a lot of studies around, the enterprise value and EBITDA versus the share of recurring revenue. And what you see is as the share of revenue recurring revenue goes up, the markets tend to kind of value better, whether it's a private market or a public market. So again, that's the data-driven mindset is A, how do I organize myself better? B, can I make a fundamental shift in my business model to go from transaction to a recurring revenue-based sticky business, right? And to do so, I think what's critical is how do we change the way we drive our business? So this is a model made famous by the Harvard Business Review and folks at McKinsey as well, is what they call every business needs to trigger this loyalty loop. Is we've spoken a lot about the marketing funnel, but I suppose a limitation of the funnel archetype is that it stops at the bottom at the client, right? Awareness, interest, consideration, purchase. But what's important is how do you, because we all know as business owners or leaders that acquiring new customers is difficult and expensive. So how do we create this loyalty loop so that we can drive recurring revenue, we can drive advocacy and loyalty, and we can drive referrals? Because again, with that same Scott Galloway mindset of driving stickiness and recurring revenue and hence enterprise value, a lot is with the mindset with which we drive our business. So essentially what we are essentially saying is we need to move from this spray and pray driven advertising model to a customer journey model. That means, back in the day, and again, don't get me wrong, again, awareness is critical. It's important to look at business cases where we create awareness, we kind of drive awareness about our products and services, but it's not enough to just create awareness. We need to ensure that we take our customers through a journey which doesn't just stop at purchase, but there's a loyalty loop thereafter. What fundamentals do we need to bear in mind if you want to get onto this customer loyalty loop or take our customers and prospects through this journey? So there are 5 fundamental key drivers of growth in the digital area that we need to bear in mind. Number one, which a lot of us marketers or business leaders tend to kind of err, is we tend to chase shiny tools and technology. It could be Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok. But again, what's important is that we are led by consumer insights and we don't kind of chase technology. That's a huge, because, few years ago, people said, oh, let's do something on Snapchat. Oh, there's IoT coming, there's 5G coming. It's important. Absolutely. These technology trends potentially will change and shape the way we kind of do business. But I think what's more important is who's our customer? Are they using these technologies? If so, let's try and kind of chase that. Number 2 is about partnerships. We can't be doing everything on our own. I wish we could. But it's important to kind of live and leverage the ecosystem. So we got to be very clear what's our core and where do we need to partner. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Number 3 is again mindset, perpetual beta. This is one of my pet topics because again, in APAC, especially a lot of businesses want to aim or achieve perfection. And it's important to bear in mind that in today's world, I mean, I think probably always, perfection is probably an illusion. It's important to ensure that we kind of aim for perfection, but we got to be comfortable with this perpetual beta mode. And perpetual beta mode is something that's been around for at least a couple of decades since the advent of all our apps. You open your smartphone, every app, be it your Gmail app or your Facebook app, by definition, they are on beta mode, which means you launch something that's good enough, you ship it out, but you keep improving. And this holds true not just for the apps or the technology, but for us as humans as well. How do we constantly improve ourselves? How do we unlearn, relearn, and move on? It's important not to be stagnant. I wouldn't stress too much on this. I'm sure all of us have read the cover story from The Economist, which made this particular point famous about data being the new oil. But all I will say is, unless you use the oil, unless you refine the oil, just like real oil has gone down in value, it's important that we use data in the right way and not just collect data for the sake of collecting. We've got to be able to clean and refine data the way we do that with real oil, and then figure out use cases of that data. And lastly, consistency. I'm a big believer in offline businesses in APAC, in Indonesia, Philippines, India, emerging markets. Whilst there is a massive trajectory in digital businesses, offline is still very critical. So if you're doing something that's omni-channel, it's important that we ensure consistency. And whilst we do that, it's important to bear the fundamentals of growth marketing in our minds. I think a lot of us, a lot of marketers, a lot of agencies tend to just get caught away with the new channels of Facebook, Twitter, Google, TikTok, what have you. But I think unless and until we kind of zoom out and look at the big picture of ultimately we are here to drive growth. And the three fundamental outcomes of any chief growth officer, marketing officer, what have you, is, am I creating the right demand? Am I capturing that demand? And most importantly, am I kind of creating that loyalty loop? Am I kind of ensuring that I'm able to retain demand through organic means? And I think having that big picture view is quite critical. And again, I won't go into details here, but we have to kind of create a mindset and learning culture, which allows us to be cognizant of demand creation and demand capture, but also be in a position to kind of measure, have the tools to measure that are we on the right track. I'm not saying you need to measure everything. That's not true at all. You need to measure what matters, but it's important to have a lens saying, ultimately, whatever I'm doing, is it helping me create new markets, create demand? Am I capturing that demand and value in terms of revenue or profits? And am I kind of retaining it? I think those fundamental principles are sacrosanct. And hence, I think a typical mantra that we tell our clients in this part of the world, where a lot of customers still focus on the first element of reach. I think there's this innate desire in marketers, I had this campaign which had a X amount of share of voice, I reached so many people. But the key question is, did you reach the right audience? Okay. If so, did they take the desired action? Did that convert to a lead or a sale? And I'm not saying every activity needs to convert to a sale immediately, but there has to be a path towards that. And if they have bought from you, are you engaging them post-purchase? Is there some sort of a loyalty? Is there some sort of a referral? So we need to take a look at that whole philosophy of loyalty loop and recurring business. Otherwise, I think we would kind of sell ourselves short. And I think a couple of things that matter a lot is to bear in mind that I think a trend, fundamental shift that I'm seeing when it comes to our mindset and our cultures in terms of driving digital transformation is, are we driving personalization? I think we need to make a faster move towards how do we move away from the spray and pray mass communication approach to personalization. And personalization not just through our marketing, but through our product, as we would have encountered with what Coke did. And if a traditional organization like Coke could drive this at a product level, I think a lot of other brands and businesses could do so, who otherwise think that their brands and logos, etc., are sacrosanct and are holy cows that you can't touch. So I think personalization, both through marketing, where you sell, if I'm a coffee lover, there's no point selling me tea. You're probably kind of missing the boat. That's at the communication or the advertising or marketing layer. At the same time, at the product layer, is there an opportunity, whether you're B2B or B2C, could you personalize the product or the experience? I think that would be a massive game changer as we kind of drive. And again, this starts with the mindset. It doesn't start with tools or technology, it's with the mindset. So essentially, to kind of drive this, the key elements are people, process, technology, data, partnerships. Because if you get these ingredients right, you would be moving towards delivering personalized customer experience. And that eventually would create a path towards profitability. And again, going back to my first slide, whether you're a DBS bank or a SingPost, or whether you are a Zomato, Paytm, or a Didi, the reality is, you may have different trajectories, but I suppose every business is ultimately driving towards sustainable profits. So even if you're on a unicorn, you probably have a leeway for 7, 8, 10 years before you can switch on that profitability tap. But you need to still have a path to profitability. And that starts, you got to look back. It starts with focusing on having the right people, the right mindset, who have the right processes and technology, and who use data. Remember, data is the new oil, but you got to be able to leverage and refine that oil, and then having the right partnerships. In the next 5, 7 minutes, I'm just going to quickly give an example or perspective on each of these 5 ingredients. So to bear in mind, digital transformation is a marathon, not a sprint. I think that's something many businesses and brands need to appreciate. There's a lot of confusion around this, where a lot of businesses I've seen in this part of the world say, okay, I'm going to hire a chief digital officer and she's my magic wand and things are going to change. Unfortunately, it isn't that easy, because again, changing mindsets and culture, it takes a while. If you've been driving a business in a particular direction, it would take time to kind of change the direction that you're moving towards. So here's a maturity model that we developed along with Google and BCG, which essentially, that's a starting point. When we work with the client, especially a traditional business, we try and assess based on their people, process, technology, data, partnerships. Are they nascent, emerging, connected, or multi-moment? There's an honest assessment. And again, this is something that we could discuss offline, but it's important to kind of get a good sense of where you are before you decide where you want to go to. So before you kind of decide the ambition, you need to have an honest assessment of where are we. And once you do that, you then need to kind of lay out a roadmap saying, okay, if I'm emerging, what does multi-moment look like for my business in terms of technology stack, people, process, partnerships, and how do we then navigate towards that, and what kind of budgets and time and skill sets would I require? So I think a starting point is to do this honest assessment independently or with a third party. And what I can tell you from our work alongside the Boston Consulting Group and Google is, by traversing on this journey, there's actually studies have shown us, at least in this part of the world, that there is both a top line and a bottom line impact. So we're not doing digital transformation for the sake of transformation. There has to be some sort of impact on your books. So talking about people, I think this is, so when you talk about the maturity assessment, when we come to people, here's again something that we have done. We've kind of mapped this out for different organizations in this part of the world. A lot of organizations, traditional businesses, many of them are in denial. Like, what, digital doesn't matter, just like the poll that we did a while ago. And some of the digital natives are, their digital is very well infused in their business or in their DNA. Most typically in this part of the world tend to start with step 2, that I have that one magic man or magic woman. Nothing wrong with it, as long as we know what to expect, just that we can't expect the world to change because of this one digital magic person. So then once we know where we stand, we need to figure out, okay, to get to the next level, what kind of team support would this person need? What kind of technology would this person need? What do we need to do to move up the chain and move towards, let's say, digital infusion? So again, org maturity is critical. Number 2, something that a lot of clients are grappling with is, should I do this in-house versus should I outsource versus a hybrid model? And something that we see is, typically, if you're a unicorn, if you're a well-funded startup, typically it's very much in-sourced for good reason. Agility, pace, budgets, etc. But if you're a traditional business, usually it's some sort of a hybrid model. You need certain skill sets in-house and certain skill sets that are maybe hard to find or retain that are outsourced. In terms of processes, people alone can't, do magic. They need to be structured in the right way, and they need to have the right sort of process. So a simple example of, this is for a very large traditional UK bank based out of Singapore. What we have been doing is it's a cross-functional team that's driving digital transformation, marketing, legal, compliance, communications, technology, so on and so forth. We use RACI charts like these to kind of keep the teams informed as to who is responsible, R for responsible, who is accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be kept informed. Otherwise, everyone thinks or believes or feels that there's lack of clarity and that everyone's responsible for everything, and then nothing moves. So having a RACI framework definitely helps clarify that. So I think what's important is clarity over certainty, perpetual beta. Coming back to technology and after people and process. So this is what, again, a typical data-driven marketing stack looks like. I'm not going to go to the detail, but the 2 critical parts to bear in mind is the foundation is the data layer. Foundation is the layer to collect data, first party data. What most marketing organizations tend to do is start at that gray layer of activation. They speak that language of, oh, what am I doing on social? What am I doing on SEO? What am I doing on display ads? That's the tip of the iceberg. That's the part that's visible. But what's important is to ensure that we have the right data layer to collect first party data, to ensure that the data can be harnessed and gleaned for insights, and then activate on the right channel rather than the other way around. If you have the right set of technology, again, going back to my theme of personalization and loyalty loop and recurring business, technology can help organizations and marketers and growth officers drive segmentation and personalization in an automated fashion. So this is for a large telco in Singapore, where earlier they were literally driving marketing as a mass comm activity, the same campaign or same marketing initiatives for everyone, one to all, broadcast. But we said, look, that isn't doing justice to your business, because you have loyal customers, you have dormant customers, you have customers at risk. They're all individual segments. We need to treat them in a personalized, customized manner. Essentially, if someone's a loyal champion, there's no point wasting a promo dollar on her. She is going to be your champion anyway. You rather put her on a loyalty program. But if someone's at risk or dormant, maybe you may want to win her back through some sort of promo campaign. So again, the point is, horses for courses. Do we have the technology to firstly segment and identify who falls in which bucket, and then can we activate and reach out to them in the right manner, right message, right device? And so in the data-driven process, what's important is data collection and cleaning. That's the unsexy part of data. That's the part of refining the oil. Am I collecting data in the right structure and format? Am I cleaning it? Am I making it analyzable? Then am I gleaning insights? And then am I activating it for the right purpose, like the example that I just gave? The goal is to get a holistic single view of each individual customer so that I can add more value to their lives. And of course, we can do the same across each channel. If I'm running campaigns and marketing initiatives across TV, radio, search, social, am I collecting data to analyze and understand which one is driving success and which one is not driving success? Because a lot of organizations don't do attribution modeling. And that kind of defeats the purpose of a data-driven mindset. Again, all of this begins with a data-driven culture and data-driven mindset. So for example, this is what we try and achieve for customers is truth in data, proof in performance. We would encourage them to have live dashboards so that the whole this is something that can change culture. This is from a real client where earlier meetings used to start with heuristics and gut feelings. Today, this is in the CEO's office. It's the board meeting would be well informed and driven by the facts and data points that we would kind of get from these real-time dashboards. Now, these dashboards could show you social media data, sales data, e-commerce data, up to you. These can be designed for purpose. Lastly, partnerships. We can't do everything on our own. Here's an example from a Southeast Asian business. They are a unicorn. Anyone in this part of the world would know Grab. They're like an Uber equivalent. In fact, they bought over certain parts of Uber's business. What they are trying to do is essentially saying, look, we would partner with well-known brands. We can leverage their credibility, their database. So they're running promo campaigns with Singapore Airlines that, use my taxis or cars to get to the airport for your flight. They're even driving partnerships with Heineken, right? Hey, can I help you drive a subscription beer model? Why does beer have to be only bought, in crates from retail outlets? Why can't I have a subscription model for selling beer to my existing loyal customers? In fact, they even have a partnership with Tinder, right? Can you find a match and, with people you hitch a ride with, right? So there can be different kinds of partnerships. The point being, you can't do everything on your own. You again need to have a collaborative mindset, right? These are all examples of, what has transpired in organizations who have had this collaborative data-driven mindset. Lastly, measurement. I think this is very critical because in digital organizations, many organizations just tend to kind of focus on vanity metrics of clicks, impressions, so on and so forth. What's important is to keep an eye on metrics that matter, profits, revenue, growth of revenue. But from a digital standpoint, you can break it down into things such as conversion rate. What's your total cost of acquiring a customer? And once you've acquired a customer, how much value are you generating? What's the customer lifetime value? So you may not be able to drive profits right away, but you can look at business metrics beyond vanity metrics of engagement and clicks. And again, you need to obviously have this funnel approach, right? Most marketers, most digital folks would be familiar with a funnel. And I think what's important is that you need to have a purview of each layer. Ultimately, you want to get towards revenue and profitability, but you still need to see what's converting where, what are the roadblocks, what roadblocks, and what can I change, what levers can I change. And so that's it from my side. I think the examples or the principles that I've shared is, I think in this part of the world, what I'm seeing is, whilst most businesses are fairly nascent, I think the good part is that there is no baggage. They don't need to traverse the journey of a traditional business going through digital transformation. They can literally leapfrog just the way they did in the mobile telephony world. And what's important is that focus on calibrating ambition and then figuring out what kind of org structure, people, skill sets do I need, what processes do I need to kind of have in place, and then supporting them with the right tech, data, and partnerships. Hopefully that was useful. Thank you so much.